Nearly a century ago, 50 million people worldwide and nearly 700,000 Americans died from the Spanish flu, a virus that raged out of control in tandem with the end of World War I. During the coronavirus lockdown, an American college student found herself quarantined with her family, including her 102-year-old grandpa, who was born during the 1918 pandemic. She was so captivated by his stories and baffled by his exclusion from our history books that she decided to produce her own podcast called Lost Prologue. Here's more in my next report.
When I was in 5th grade, I spent months learning about the Black Death, a plague so deadly and contagious that Christians were certain it had been sent by a vindictive God.
Deadly global pandemics have plagued human existence for centuries.
But as horrifying as this disease was, it belonged to ancient history, a threat that had faded with the fall of Constantinople. Or so I thought.
Margo Gray's second semester of senior year at Duke University was cut short with the outbreak of the coronavirus.
I've basically been home ever since. And it's been a little disorienting. It feels a bit like I'm back in high school. But one of the silver linings was that I was lucky enough to be quarantining with my grandfather, who is 102.
Margo and her 3 sisters got to spend months of quality time with their 102-year-old Grandpa Phil, whose life experience supersedes anything you could learn in the classroom.
His mother died when he was very young, so his father sent him to a Jewish boys' orphanage, and that's where he grew up. And so it was this orphanage that was funded by wealthy German Jews, he has a lot of fond memories from the orphanage and the friends that he made there.
My dad had to pay for me because he was working.
Yeah.
Most of the kids were true orphans.
He has this one story about the time that he tasted chocolate for the first time. And it's just such a salient memory for him. Because that was one of the great pleasures of his childhood.
Phil Basser was born in 1918 during the outbreak of the Spanish flu, which infected 1/3 of the world population, killing over 50 million people, nearly 700,000 in the U.S., with Philadelphia being one of the hardest hit cities.
I can remember as bright as day when they put a sign on the quarantine, yeah, I remember that.
And why did they do that?
And I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
Because all the neighbors were out playing.
Margo, who studied history and journalism, worked on a college radio show and realized in this age of new media, she felt a calling to produce her own 4-episode podcast called Lost Prologue.
I'm Margo Gray. On this season of Lost Prologue, we'll be talking to historians, scientists, and doctors to uncover what we know and what we don't know about the world's deadliest pandemic, an influenza pandemic that killed more people in a year than the bubonic plague killed over the course of 100.
Interviewing several historians and scientists, Margo discovered the Spanish flu, which didn't actually originate in Spain, spiraled out of control with the end of World War I. In fact, more U.S. soldiers died of the virus than were killed in battle.
It's amazing to look back at the old newspapers because, in Philadelphia, even as hundreds of people are dying, the flu will be covered on the back pages or in a margin. And it's very striking to compare to the coverage today.
Episode 1, called The Cost of War, looks at the political motivations of President Woodrow Wilson.
So right after we declared war on Germany, President Wilson actually created a new branch of government that was specifically designed to foster patriotism and sort of engage in a form of soft press censorship.
The governments feared letting the truth out. They didn't want people to panic. They wanted to keep morale high. They didn't want the enemy to know that they were weakened by the flu.
Chapter 2: Who Lives, Who Dies? The second chapter looks at the ways that Americans were differentially and inequitably impacted. So, like we're seeing today, unfortunately. In 1918, legalized segregation barred Black patients and Black medical professionals from accessing most hospitals and healthcare facilities. And on the whole, white nurses and physicians refused to treat Black victims.
Phil, who also lived through the Great Depression and later served in World War II, experienced firsthand prejudice and anti-Semitism.
In basic training, we had a first sergeant. Every once in a while, he would refer to it as the United States. See?
So what can we learn from the wrongs of the past, the parallels of today, and the pain of the corona pandemic has caused on the entire nation?
I'm hoping that we will come out of this and recognize all that we lost and all the ways that we failed, and become stronger from it. When I asked my grandpa if he's optimistic, he unflinchingly says yes. Of course, the story is yet to be written.
Emily Francis, I-24 News.